Yeah. Fly was flying on the team. Touchdown, touchdown. Time to get Jalen this ring. You don't really want to start a thing. This a bird gang nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling on Philly the podcast. And we can call a man dog or watch Miles score off the handoff. Rest of the division, your man soft. Jackson like Sean, hunting like Randolph. Season here, really time to do them in. Your boy Philly Fresco. Thanks for tuning in.
What is going on, you guys? It's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, and it is Philly the podcast. So today we have another special guest, man. We got my guy Nick Farabaugh. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, let them know where they can find your work and everything, and what you do, and then we'll get right into this. But first, let them know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Nick Farabaugh. I'm Steelers beat writer over at Steelers Now. So I cover them pretty much every day. I'm also the host of Locked On Pitt. I know a lot of people from Philly that are Pitt fans too. So you're Eagles Pitt fans. Someone that I know is Kenny Pickett, who was a Pitt Eagles guy. So yeah, that's where you can find my stuff, read my stuff, listen to me, all of that great stuff.
Definitely, man. And like I said before, man, we do appreciate your time. So we're gonna pick your mind a little bit, try and get in the head of the Steelers and what we can kind of expect come Sunday, right? So I know a lot has changed throughout this season. We could say throughout the past couple years, but we'll make it short, right? We'll make it short and stay to this season. Can you kind of walk me through? I know the Steelers sitting at 2-5. Kenny Pickett now the starter. Can you kind of walk me through the start of this season and kind of just what brought us here and what made Kenny Pickett end up being the starter?
Yeah, it came out with a really strong start, right? The win over Cincinnati in Cincinnati was a massive win for Pittsburgh. That was kind of a statement win, like, okay, well, Mike Tomlin's not going anywhere, and then it kind of just went down from there, mainly because T.J. Watt got hurt, which was I think a huge factor in everything, and then you also had the just bad play of Mitch Trubisky. That really was the big thing, and then Matt Canada, the play caller, didn't do a lot. The secondary got really banged up too. Minka Fitzpatrick I missed a game. But the thing about the secondary is literally when you look at the depth chart from the bottom to the top, all of those guys have been injured and missed a game at some point. So this is a super injured secondary. Now they're healthy finally. Not fully, but they are just about there. But that didn't help. That's why they got shredded by Josh Allen and the Bills a good bit of the time. And they just haven't had pass rush without T.J. Watt. And then you look at the offense, and it just has been bad the whole time. Mitch Trubisky wasn't getting it done. And at some point, Mike Tomlin said, "What am I doing here? It's time. We're about to fall to 1-3, 1-4. I'm just going to play Kenny Pickett. Let's see what we have in the rookie." And Pickett gave him a little bit of a spark. Now, he's not perfect. He's a rookie. He's up and down. He's a rookie quarterback, even if he's 24 years old and all of this. He's a rookie quarterback, but that's how they got to that point because Mr. Trubisky wasn't giving them anything. The offensive coordinator hasn't really helped them out. They've got inconsistencies all over the field, and that team has just been hurt on the defensive side of the football. It's a good defense if they're really healthy. They just have not been healthy defensively, and that's kind of why they're 2-5. I don't think they're as bad 2-5 wise as the defense goes. The offense is definitely probably worse than a 2-5 team, but the defense, if it had been healthy, probably could have dragged them to 3 or 4 wins already. But it just hasn't worked out that way, man.
Definitely. And you bring all that up. You bring up the injuries, and I love Tomlin. I think that he's a very underrated coach. With what he's been given over the better part of his career, I think he's made gold out of it. So I'm a big fan of him as a person and as a coach. But you bring that all up. You talk about how the season, you make the quarterback change. A lot of times people kind of marry that type of change to a season that maybe isn't fully vested, right? So my question is, what does this season going forward mean for the Steelers? Is this kind of figuring out what Kenny Pickett is, kind of figuring out what team you have, or is there a sense of, we can turn this around in Pittsburgh still? And I'm asking because the Eagles got to sit here and be sure we're not sleeping on a team that's looking to kind of turn it around at this time.
Yeah, well, don't let Mike Tomlin hear any talk about them just figuring out what's happening this year. I don't think Mike Tomlin wants to lose ever, and I think that still stands. Yeah, that's what they're doing. I think they're figuring out what they got in Kenny. I think they're starting to try and put together future pieces around him, and try to figure out, okay, this is what we need this year. This is what we need to prioritize. This is how we can kind of build around Kenny Pickett. But man, this year, it doesn't matter what year it is. Mike Tomlin's going to try to win, and that's what they're trying to do. I mean, even if getting a top 5 pick and the Steelers just go downhill, get a top 5 pick, even if they get a top 5 pick, or maybe they can draft Will Anderson or someone like that. That's unbelievable. A franchise left tackle, or even Jordan Addison. I'll say that one too. But like, even if they get that, Mike Tomlin doesn't want that. Mike Tomlin wants wins, and so I think it's a weird mix of, okay, we're figuring out what's coming for us next year and what we have, and then it's also the real weird mix of, we're the Steelers. We can't lose. We have to win, and so it's a transitional kind of doubt, I think, that the Steelers aren't fully in, and they're not going to trade anybody. But I think that they also recognize that this is a year where they're really not going to do anything. So I think they're learning their team.
Definitely, definitely. And you did say that you got some guys coming back, especially on that defensive side. We're a couple games into, the Kenny Pickett era. He's starting to hopefully figure it out, like you said. So I want to ask you, what are some of the matchups that you expect the Steelers to try and take advantage of when it comes to this game against the Eagles on Sunday?
Yeah, listen, I mean, the Steelers really don't have a burning advantage offensively, right? It's not a good run blocking unit. Najee Harris has been dealing with the Liz Frank injury for most of the year, and he's just finally getting healthy. That's been another injury that has really hurt this offense, I think, is the fact that Najee Harris has just not been good because he hasn't been healthy. And that's hurt their run game, but last week was kind of the first signs of life we saw on that side of the ball. So maybe that's eventually going to get worked out. I wouldn't put it up against this Eagles front, but maybe. If you look at what maybe they're going to try and work, I would imagine they're going to try and stress those linebackers of the Eagles and maybe see what they can do with Pat Fryermuth, Chase Claypool, and those guys kind of over the middle. Maybe they use their size. I think that's one of the things that the Steelers do have, is they have the kind of height, weight, and size to maybe be able to work over the middle of the field and kind of make them a little uncomfortable. But I think they're going to try, and they've done it every game. It doesn't matter who they're going up against. I think they are going to go at Slay and Bradbury. I think they will. And I don't care if you think that's smart or not. The Steelers' offense is designed to beat you on the sidelines. It just is. They run a lot of go balls, curls, comeback, 7 routes. They do it. So Deontay Johnson is probably going to be a heavy factor in that game plan. I think Deontay Johnson against Slay and Bradbury is a big matchup to watch, because I've seen Deontay Johnson go toe to toe with anybody, and then I've seen Deontay Johnson look awful against anybody. At times he's a wide receiver one, at times he's unplayable. I can't tell you which Deontay Johnson will show up next week. But I do know that the Steelers are going to try and go and get explosive plays for the first time really ever. They're going to try and push the ball down the field. They've talked about this all week. We're pushing the ball down the field this week. We have to get explosive plays. And listen, that speaks to one man, and it's George Pickens. They're gonna try and get George Pickens involved, and this is gonna be a big test for George Pickens going up against this Eagles secondary that has been so good this year. I imagine that's kind of what they're looking at right now, is that they're gonna try and get explosive plays over the top. But man, I don't know. It's just not a lot for them to kind of work with on that side of the ball, and then you kind of work over to the other side. It's a really good O line. You probably won't have TJ Watt, even though he's close. They're probably going to hold him out through the bye week. Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi kind of have to be maybe the focal points, and maybe you can get one up on Landon Dickerson. Maybe that's what happens. Wide receivers, again, I think they have an advantage against the Steelers. This Bengals team has an advantage on the Steelers, so I don't know what they're going to do. It's tough to point to a clear strategy. I just have to imagine middle of the field stuff, maybe against the linebackers, and then try to hit it over the top with George Pickens.
Yeah, you guys have a wide receiver factory going over there. I don't know how you guys do it. You guys always seem to have three really good, to great wide receivers. So it's fun to watch. Uh, a couple of my subscribers actually asked about George Pickens, so this is a perfect time to kind of ask about him. A lot of people are asking, how do you guys feel over there? Obviously, from here as a fan that doesn't watch the Steelers every week, we see the highlight plays, right? We see the Sports Center top catches and everything like that. But what's the feeling in Pittsburgh? Do they feel like they have a star wide receiver there?
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone thinks George Pickens is the next guy. And Pickens is so good with just how he contorts his body and makes unbelievable grabs, man. I haven't seen a guy do this in a long time. He reminds me so much of Mike Williams, the Chargers, like very similar player. He just goes up and grabs anything out of the air. He catches everything. He's going to toe tap along the sideline. He's going to somehow get those toes in. He's the most quarterback friendly quarterback, like quarterback target you can have. Like it's really impressive to watch George Pickens. And the feeling in Pittsburgh right now is he doesn't get the ball enough. Like that's kind of what it is. George Pickens right now is just not getting the ball enough, and every time he's targeted, good things happen because this is a guy that just makes things happen. I mean, he runs so many go routes, though. I think he like leads the NFL in go routes run. He's a guy that gets targeted deep down the field most of the time, not a lot underneath. Probably should get that stuff though underneath too. He's just such a strong player at all levels of the field, and he's not going to separate a ton from you, but it doesn't really matter because he just seemingly knows how to box out, go up, high point the ball. He's got strong hands. He's got that all, and so you look at him, man, and he looks like the next premier jump ball receiver in the NFL. That's kind of how the Steelers feel about him.
Yeah, he's fun. He's fun to watch, and I think that a lot of people saw it pre-draft. I think obviously the injury scared a lot of people off, and now everybody's kicking themselves in the rear end because he's exactly what everybody thought he most likely could be. I don't want to say he was like a surefire thing. Obviously, there was concerns, but a lot of people thought he was going to be as good as he is, and to see it actually happen is awesome. I mean, and to go off of that, to kind of piggyback off of that, how do the Eagles? I mean, we do have a good secondary, but I do feel like if you're a great wide receiver, you're going to get yours. How do you, or how does anybody try to stop that wide receiver trio? Does it really just come down to once Kenny Pickett kind of gets it together and figures it out, it's going to be no way to stop it, or is there some weaknesses to these guys' games?
They're all inconsistent, and that's the weakness. Deontay Johnson is a roller coaster. When he is on, he is great. When he is off, you can't play him. Same with Chase Claypool, man. You've seen Chase Claypool play really well. When he plays awful, you can't play him. Pickens is a little different. Pickens doesn't really have the inconsistencies. He's just a rookie. So he's more of okay, they're not going to force feed it to him quite yet because he's a rookie and they have these veteran guys and they have Fryermuth and all of that. And I think Pat Fryermuth is kind of like the fourth amigo of these three really good receivers because he's kind of their dependable guy that they're like, they get him involved. When everything else is inconsistent, Fryermuth calms everything down. And so that's kind of how it works out. If Kenny Pickett can play really well, yeah, man, it's going to be tough to stop them. But the thing is, and I say that they should target the middle of the field and the linebackers this week, but they don't do it. Like they do not use 65% of the field. It's not a Kenny Pickett thing. It's a Matt Canada thing. And this is one of the reasons why you see him so heavily criticized as like offensive coordinator is he just uses the sidelines a lot. The middle of the field isn't utilized very much. And so it really kind of cuts off Chase Claypool's production and Pat Frymuth's production. So you're really just kind of, to be quite honest with you, force feeding Deontay Johnson a lot of the time, and every now and then you force feed George Pickens. But it feels like Deontay Johnson almost gets force fed, and then it kind of leaves Chase Claypool, who's out a lot, just kind of running cardio. To be quite honest with you, um, he's open, and it just the progression isn't there. It's not supposed to go to him, which is weird. So I imagine they have to fix it. because I wouldn't be surprised if Canada's coaching for his job this game.
Mm.
So we'll see. But that's kind of how you stop them is they they don't call plays to take advantage of them. And they've got three really good receivers and a good tight end and a running back out of the backfield that can do a lot of good things. So if Kenny Pickett starts to get going, man, this offense will be decent enough.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. They just got to get going. They have three really solid receivers, but right now, I don't think they're much of an issue. And it's not really because of them. Sometimes it can be because of their inconsistencies, but man, the coaching is just awful right now on that side of the
Mm.
ball.
Damn, and I do like Pat Frymuth. I'm gonna put that out there. I know you're a Pitt guy. You work for Pitt and everything, but I'm a Penn State guy through and through. Even when they make me cry, they've done that this year already. It's inaugural at this point. But no, you guys Pitt. It's always a fun game against you guys, and you guys have produced some really just some heck of a players, man. You go all the way back to James Conner, and just his story alone was just crazy. And I always just kind of remember that and associate that with Pitt. I know that's like a very long-winded random rant, but it's crazy to hear that about the coaching because like I said, I don't watch the Steelers every day. I obviously don't cover them, but I always associate the Steelers with just that hard-nosed coaching because I'm always thinking of Tomlin, and this is another question that I feel was, I don't want to say a dumb question. There's no dumb questions in the world, but I felt like was it was a dumb question. But people were asking, do they think Tomlin is on the hot seat? And I just can't see that being a possibility. Am I the dumb one for thinking that's not a possibility? Do you think that's even on the cards?
No, Mike Tomlin's going to stay in Pittsburgh probably about as long as he can. And by that, I mean, I think he's got the option to leave whenever he wants to leave, but it's on his terms.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about that. Mike Tomlin's a great football coach, and people overthink it. He's got his flaws, just like any coach does in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
No coach is perfect. Andy Reid got fired, for goodness sakes. I don't think anyone thinks he's a bad coach. Um, Mike Tomlin's a great coach, and he's not going to get fired for anything soon because, one, I don't think that the organization has reasonable expectations this year to actually compete. And I think that is true enough. And then, two, why? He's a very, very, very good coach. He's a leader of men. He is a good defensive coach that people don't talk about enough. He is a good schematic defensive coach. And I think we've seen that recently as he's kind of brought them back into the fold. Slowing down Tua Tagovailoa on Monday Night Football after getting eviscerated in the first quarter, going down 13-0. Miami didn't do anything after that. That's Mike Tomlin calling some audibles there. So he's a great coach. I think he does have flaws. I think hiring offensive coordinators and offensive staff is a massive one of them. He's got to get that down. But is he on the hot seat? No. And listen, Mike Tomlin hasn't even had the opportunity to be afforded to lose because he hasn't.
Yeah.
He hasn't
Yeah.
lost. And you look back on the Steelers' history, they have given that to Chuck Noll. They've given that to Bill Cowher. They've given it to their last two coaches, and the Rooneys are going to give it to Mike Tomlin. So, Mike Tomlin, if he gets fired, it will be a long time down the road. He will have to considerably just roll off the cliff, if you will. And again, I think Mike Tomlin's too good of a coach for that to happen. So, I can't see
Word.
it.
If you guys ever want to let him go, and you know what I'm saying, he could come on. But he won't even have to travel that far. He could come on down to Philly. We'll take it. We'll find a spot for him, man. We won't mind at all. I got two more questions for you, Nick, and then I'm gonna let you go. You talked about expectations, and I'm glad that you brought that up because obviously, like you said, this is probably one of the rare times that nobody's looking at Tomlin and being like, "You got to bring this team to the playoffs." You do have a young quarterback, a guy that was picked in the later part of the first round, but picked in the first round. What's the expectation? What's the, I guess, hope at the end of the day for a Kenny Pickett? Is this a guy that you see them building with long term? Is this a guy that may end up just being a bridge guy and you guys are looking or trying to fill that position next year? What's the expectation? What's the feel on Kenny Pickett over there in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, man, the hope is that he's the franchise guy. Listen, he doesn't have an obvious superstar trait to him. He's got a lot of moxie. And in a lot of ways, he does remind you a bit of Joe Burrow. Um, I think he fits more of a Derek Carr type of player. And I think that's kind of what the hope is. Let's see what he can become when he's 26, 27. And that's the thing. Kenny Pickett's not gonna ever have this great arm. He's never gonna have a Mahomes Allen arm. And I think he still thinks he kind of does because he's made a few picks that he just cannot make in the NFL. He just doesn't have the arm for it. But Justin Herbert and those guys can make that throw. So he'll learn that, man. But he's very, very talented off script, off kind of platform, just throwing off weird angles and arm angles. He's got that ability. He's mobile enough. He's not super mobile, like he's not a Jalen Hurts or anything like that, but he's got good mobility. He's a guy that I think is growing by the week and getting more intelligent with reading coverages. So I think his hope is like a Derek Carrish player. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar. I don't see that, but he's got moxie. He's got that kind of pizzazz and charisma, if you will, to be a leader of men. We have already seen that this year where these guys have kind of rallied around him. The consistency just needs to come. He's just volatile right now. He's a rookie. He's still learning the game. So the hope is that you have a franchise quarterback here. And that's going to be the question. I don't even know what his ceiling is. I don't think Derek Carr's the ceiling. I think the ceiling is maybe something more like a Dak Prescott, which is he going to reach? I don't know. But I think that's got to be kind of the hope of what you look at here in a guy like this. So yeah, man, I think that's the hope. He's the long term answer is the hope. Is he going to be that? I have my doubts, but I think that they're going to certainly hope that.
I hear that, man. I hear that. So, last question I want to ask you, man, is I know going through a process where you got a young guy you at quarterback, you got a young team, you know, maybe sometimes the wins and losses don't feel the greatest, but looking at your position groups, looking at certain players, sometimes you're like, okay, I didn't expect this from this guy or this group, and I'm excited to see what happens there. Where is there a spot on the Pittsburgh Steelers or a player, a position group that you're looking at and you're like, hey, I like where this is going. This might be something to look at in the future. This is surprising us.
Yeah, I'll tell you a player who is surprising us. Terrell Edmonds, the running mate of Minka Fitzpatrick on the back end. I'll tell you what, Edmonds has been a great player this year. Just playing up in the box, he does so many different things. He's a box safety, he's a linebacker, he's a slot corner, he's a free safety, he's a dime backer. He is doing everything this year. He covers tight ends, he covers running backs, he covers receivers. He had an unreal play where he ranged over from the opposite hash and caught up to Tyreek Hill and broke up a pass last week. Should have probably been a pick. He just does so many good things this year. I mean, he has been phenomenal for the Steelers. And I think that's been a big boost for them with that secondary kind of banged up. And the secondary is not great. I mean, they're fine. You know, the corners aren't like elite. They have a bunch of like corner two, corner three guys. They don't have a the guy like a Darius Slay. They don't have that. But they do have a lot of just good players. But Terrell Edmonds was considered the weak link. He's pretty much erased tight ends all year. That's been the big thing. Tight ends against the Steelers have just gone AWOL. Like, where are they at? And so I would imagine that Dallas Goedert might see him a little bit this week, which is going to be a fun matchup. The only guy that has really gotten up on Edmonds from a tight end perspective is David Njoku, who is just having an unreal season for Cleveland. But he has been a real find. Other guys you kind of like, Miles Jack up there, you know, former Jaguar, man. He's come in. He's been a really solid signing for them. In terms of young guys, I'll say this. I think that you have seen kind of the offensive line on the right side grow a little bit. Chuks Okorafor is only 24. James Daniels is only 24. They're on their second contract, so they're not really young by NFL standards because they're in their fifth year. But these guys are both 24 in their fifth year. So young players, but they've really come into their own. So I think you kind of look at some pieces on this team as going the right direction. Now, I'll say one other guy, Alex Highsmith, who is the guy opposite of TJ Watt. Which, by the way, we got hints today that it's possible. I don't know if it's going to happen, but TJ Watt is pushing to potentially play this week. That could change this game completely if it does happen. But Alex Highsmith has been really good, even without TJ Watt. And that's been a big thing. He's been pretty much the only one actually getting pressure on the defensive line. he's a guy that has a really good spin move. He's really good as a run defender, grown there. Super intelligent football player. He's a guy that just makes you feel him throughout the game, and so I'm very interested to see what he can do in this one because he's facing two really good tackles. They'll move him around, but it seems like even when he goes up against good tackles, last week facing Teron Armstead, still got 5 pressures on Tua. So he has been able to put up production even against good tackles. So I'm very interested to kind of see what Alex Highsmith can do too.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because that's definitely something that we've been kind of. I don't want to say struggling against. I mean, when you're 6-0, it's hard to say you're struggling. I'll just kidding, but no, it has been something that we've seen a lot. A lot of people in Jalen Hurts' face, and obviously, him being able to run around is it kind of negates some of that. But hopefully, it's gonna catch up to you some point. So we got to get better at it. Hopefully, we figure something in this bye week. But we got the Steelers versus the Eagles this Sunday only once every 4 years. This is our you know what I'm saying? So Nick, I'll call you in 4 years, I guess, after this. But it's gonna be fun, man. I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything you want to say? Tell them anything you got coming up before we do get off here.
Yeah, yeah, just read my stuff at Steelers Now. I'm covering that. TJ Watt's going to speak tomorrow, so I think that's probably where we'll find out if the old man's going to come off the IR and give it a go across the state, which could obviously change the complexion of this matchup.
Really would,
If
yeah.
TJ Watt is back in the fold, but outside of that, make sure again to check out the Locked On Pitt podcast if you are one of the many Philly transplants to Pittsburgh that I know come over across the state. If you're a Penn State fan, you probably hate me right now because Philly is largely Penn State territory. But I know plenty of Pitt people, so make sure to check it out if you are a Pitt fan too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate you so much, man. And I appreciate everybody that locked in. Be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, join the family, and definitely go check out all of Nick's work, man. He puts in work. Go show love. But other than that, I will be back tomorrow with Fran Duffy around 11 o'clock. I don't even know what time. I'll post it. I promise you guys. But other than that, y'all know what it is, man. It is Fly Equals Fly. And we are out of here. Peace.
Everywhere. This is for
Yeah.
you.
Fly was flying on the team. Touchdown, touchdown. Time to get Jalen this ring. You don't really want to start a thing. This a bird gang nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling on Philly the podcast. And we can call a man dog or watch Miles score off the handoff. Rest of the division, your man saw Jackson like Deshaun, hunting like Randall. Season here, early time to do him in. Your boy Philly Fresco. Thanks for tuning